This is just fun speculation. Don't come at me about how this isn't accurate, or that it wouldn't look like this or whatever. We're just having fun here. Now that we've gotten a look at what Mammon looks like, it made me think about the other princes we haven't seen. As of Season 2 Episode 6, we have yet to see Satan of Wrath, Belphegor of Sloth, and Leviathan of Envy. I already did a fun speculative fan art of what Belphegor could look like. In fact, I might do a redesign of her. So now I want to do some speculations on what Leviathan could look like. In researching Leviathan, I fell down a rabbit hole and learned a lot of cool stuff, and now I must pass this knowledge to you all lol. If you'd rather skip to the full reveal and an explanation of the design, go to this timestamp. In my research, I believe Leviathan would be the oldest and possibly the most powerful of the sins, and likely not even a demon, just as Lucifer is not. I think that her strength would actually rival Lucifer's, and that they have a tumultuous relationship. And yes, I believe Leviathan would be a woman. I'll explain why later. I know Vivziepop and co use the Peter Binsfeld classification of demons, but I posit that Binsfeld, as a bishop, would have no doubt studied other theologians' works and commentaries about their interpretations of Jewish and Christian mythology, such as Thomas Aquinas. First, let's begin with the origins and descriptions of Leviathan herself. Also, I am by no means an expert on theology, mythology, mysticism, or linguistics. I'm just a history person who can read some Latin, Greek, and a little bit of Hebrew. I'm sure I'll get something wrong. Remember, we're just having fun here. Some say the name Leviathan likely comes from the root verb lwh, which means to coil or entwine. I'm a fan of this theory, since both the name and creature seem to be a direct copy of the earlier Sumerian monster Lotan, whose own root is Ltn, meaning coiled. Lotan was the world serpent embodying chaos, defeated by the Sumerian god Hadal-Baal, who, in doing so, brought the world to peace and order. This trope is used in many religions and mythologies such as Zeus and Typhon, Thor and Jomungand, Apep and Ra, and the other Near Eastern stories of Marduk and Shamat, and Yahweh and Leviathan. In the Tanakh, there are many interesting descriptions and discussions of Leviathan. The term itself, in real life, was often used as a general term referring to any large aquatic creature such as crocodiles or hippos. Later on, the term would evolve to become a term referring only to what we now call cetaceans such as whales and dolphins. One description shows up in Prophets, Isaiah 27:1, quote, "On that day the Lord with his cruel and great and strong sword will punish Leviathan the fleeing serpent, Leviathan the twisting serpent, and he will kill the dragon that is in the sea." Psalms 74:14 says Leviathan has more than one head. But one of the most interesting descriptions comes from the book of Job. In 40:25 through 41:26, God describes the Leviathan as he's ranting to Job about how awesome he is. He describes her as gargantuan, with many limbs, skin like a double coat of mail, rows of teeth, a spiked back, eyes as bright as dawn, able to breathe fire, with a strong neck, fat folds, and a heart as heavy as a millstone. She is so large that when she breaches the gods shudder, and has such strong armor that, quote, "Iron is as straw, bronze as rotten wood, clubs as chaffs, and javelins make her laugh." Interestingly, that section ends with the phrase, "It is king over all that are proud." But my favorite description comes from the Book of Enoch. While not canon in most sects of Judaism or Christianity, I would say it is culturally canon. Just as Dante's work is not canon, his was so influential on culture, society, theology, art, and history that it might as well be. The same can be said for Enoch. It's in the Book of Enoch that describes Lucifer's origins and fall, the origins of the Nephilim, giants, and demons, and the hierarchy of angels and demons. In the third parable of Enoch 60:7-9, describes the origin of Leviathan herself. "And on that day were two monsters parted, a female monster named Leviathan, to dwell in the abysses of the ocean over the fountains of the waters. But the male is named Behemoth, who occupied with his breast a waste wilderness named Danadian on the east of the Garden of Eden, where the elect and righteous dwell. How they were parted on one day and cast, the one into the abysses of the sea, and the other unto the dry land of the wilderness." Enoch describes that Leviathan is one half of the whole primordial chaotic entity, with Behemoth her other half, both predating God. God, in this story, defeats them by separating the entity into two, and banishing them both. I like this story a lot, not just because of the lost halves trope, but also that it reconciles a few inconsistencies in the otherwise completely consistent wider Bible.
And in case you didn't know, that was sarcasm.
Here Leviathan is both created by God and predates him. Previously in this primordial entity that God destroys like in the other world serpent stories, but can only defeat her by separating and thereby creating two new entities, Leviathan and Behemoth. One day they will be whole again, and cause the apocalypse, which is also more consistent with the dragon-like entity in the Book of Revelations. The Hebrew Midrash, which are commentaries on the Tanakh, also follow the Book of Enoch, saying that God made only two Leviathans, a male and a female, but killed the female to keep them from reproducing and destroying the world. Additionally, other Midrash state that the whale that ate Jonah was Leviathan instead of a large whale. One more fun tidbit is that Leviathan is apparently kosher, because the Talmud states that the flesh of the slain female Leviathan will be served to the righteous on Judgment Day, and therefore must be a kosher sea creature and not a snake or crocodile-like creature. In Christianity, Leviathan is simultaneously demoted to a demon or fallen angel embodying the sin of envy and covetousness, while also maintaining some of her more cosmic horror primordial god of chaos roots. Interestingly, in the Book of Revelation, Leviathan is described as a red, fiery dragon with 7 heads. This seems to be a new invention, though the 7 heads could refer to the Enoch version in which Leviathan and Behemoth were once one whole different being, likely with several heads. This seems plausible because later in Revelation, Leviathan joins with the beast of the earth, likely Behemoth, to cause chaos on earth. Now let's discuss Leviathan as the prince of envy. The Bible itself places the sin of envy, or covetousness, as one of if not the worst sin one could commit. Many early theologians place it above pride in terms of gravity, some calling envy as the true cause of all sins. I like this idea since it keeps to Leviathan's otherworldly powers, beyond that of angels, demons, and even God himself. And in terms of Lucifer and Leviathan, I like that since pride and envy are very similar, they are both more or less on par with each other in terms of how bad they are for the soul, which would make Leviathan on the same level as Lucifer, and in earlier works, above him. Envy is present everywhere, even in God himself, as there are 2 whole commandments about it, quote, "You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I the Lord your God am a jealous God. And you shall not covet anything that belongs to your neighbor." Additionally, Proverbs states that jealousy makes the bones rot. And in Ecclesiastics, they say that envy is the cause of all the world's woes. Thomas Aquinas' work Summa Theologica, as well as other things he authored, quickly became the go-to text for subsequent theologians, including Peter Binsfeld. In it, he actually argues that envy is not the worst sin but pride, which I think led to the other rankings placing pride above the others. He ends up having it both ways, stating that while envy is the root of all sins, pride is the beginning. Quote, covetousness regards sin as turning towards the mutable good by which sin is, as it were, nourished and fostered, for which reason covetousness is called the root. Whereas pride regards sin as turning away from God, to whose commandment man refuses to be subject, for which reason it is called the beginning. Because the beginning of evil consists in turning away from God. Aquinas further defines what envy is, stating envy, which is sadness about another's good, as being a hindrance to one's own excellence. I really like this definition as well, because it invokes the idea of Leviathan's own envy and sadness at her state, reduced to a mere prince underneath another likely lesser being like the seraphim Lucifer. The sadness at Lucifer's good fortune, ruling in hell rather than serve in heaven. In the Helluva Boss universe, she would rule over a ring which is likely a vast deep ocean, only able to be inhabited by certain demons, whereas nearly everyone can easily traverse into any other ring. How Leviathan would covet Lucifer's ring, since he can hoard the earthborn sinners. Jealousy at the power of God and heaven, ruling over a world she once would have. I think it shows a more tragic character whose bitterness you can relate to. Relating envy with a type of sadness was also shown in other early classifications of sins. The 4th century monk Evagrius the Solitary made a list of 8 sins, placing sadness in the place which envy would later take. When translated into Latin, it remained as a type of sadness called tristitia, which better translates to despair and despondency, both of which I think are also related to envy. This line of reasoning would be used by many other clergymen, including Binsfeld nearly 300 years later. Combining both Aquinas' ranking of the 7 sins and the then highly popular witch hunts, and classifying and organizing the ranks of demons during his own time, Binsfeld classified his rankings and demon lords as the ones we are familiar with in Helluva Boss. Quote, "For some preside over a single province, others over a single person, and some even over a single vice. Thus Lucifer over pride, Mammon over avarice, Asmodeus over lust, Satan over anger and discord, Beelzebub over gluttony, Leviathan over envy, Beelzebub over sloth. And each of these provinces strives most to lead to that sin." With that long history lesson over and done with, let's take a look at my rendition of Leviathan, Prince of Envy. Definitely went overboard on this one too. I envision Leviathan as a being nearly as massive as the ring itself, swimming around aimlessly and frustrated like a shark in a tank that's too small. Sure, she could control her size, but she's far too proud. I tried to be true to the many descriptions of her. I had her tails entwined with each other to be true to her name, which means to coil or entwine in Hebrew. I kept her massive and appearing like a strange mermaid of sorts, with elements of fish and mammal. Through the description of her in the Book of Job and Revelation, I tried to show her resilience to injuries. The scars on her are from her battle with God, the only being strong enough to do real injury to her, the worst of which was clawing out a section of her torso. And yet she continues to exist as though the injury means nothing. I tried to make her expression disinterested, somber, and forlorn. In the description in the Book of Enoch, she was once the primordial chaos that inhabited the world, existed as part of one entity, combined with Behemoth, before God separated them and cast her into the deep abyss. Like Belphegor, I imagine her having 2 forms, her original, massive eldritch form, and a much smaller one that can be used to govern envy as well as making sure everyone around her envies her and her beauty and finery. Her smaller form in this case comes from her angler, invoking the idea that she lures people to gaze upon her and her palace with great envy. Her only joy is making others wish they were her. Many Jewish commentaries state that the whale that ate Jonah was Leviathan, so I have placed a large submarine-like palace in the cavity where her stomach once was. Within this palace are the worldly beauty, with artifacts, jewels, and styles not seen anywhere else in hell. Here it would look strange, old and ancient, cosmic with eldritch horrors and beauty. Only the most privileged would be allowed, but also shows off her home and exclusive parties to others to feed off of their envy, likely through the Envy app. I've made her palace and her small form style off of Sumerian fashion and architecture to keep true to her very ancient roots, as Leviathan seems to be a direct character from the Sumerian world. Serpent Lotan. She wears a large, ornate, strange and otherworldly crown, decorated in gold and an unknown green gem. She uses this attire to draw all eyes on her and make them jealous and envious of her, feeding off of their yearning, envy, adoration, and even hatred. In this rendition, I envision Leviathan as just as, if not more powerful than Lucifer himself. I would say that their relationship is complicated, as she predates him and his rebellion. She would have been the first to rebel in a time before time. But now her power is greatly reduced. When Lucifer was cast down into hell, he would have found Leviathan in the abyss, and made a deal with her, working together to become kings in their own right and slowly build their forces to eventually take on God in heaven once again. The only catch would be that Leviathan would have to share her power and ancient knowledge to help Lucifer build hell and bring its native life to the true demon forms we see, and be subservient to him, becoming Prince of Envy, while Lucifer, while Prince of Pride, would be king of all hell. As the sins of pride and envy are closely entwined, Thomas Aquinas himself says that while envy is the root of all sins, pride is the beginning of it all. I think their relationship would be complicated, both complementary and rivaling each other. Lucifer would likely keep a close eye on Leviathan while content to let her govern envy however she pleases, keeping to the strange and ancient aesthetics that existed before even his time. This and the ring being mostly a deep ocean, would make Envy very different than the other rings. Despite this, the two would still remember their ancient pact and honor it. She remains subservient, as she is eternal. She can bide her time, waiting for the day she, Lucifer, and the other sins open the gates of hell and storm heaven. And there you have it, my speculation as to what Leviathan could look like. I'm really happy with this design and had a lot of fun drawing her. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.